After my brother's business collapsed, I came home for Thanksgiving only to be blocked at the door by my parents. You refused to sell your store for $450,000 when your brother needed it. You're no longer our daughter, my father shouted. All our assets will go to your brother. I stared at them in silence, then smiled. They had no idea I'd been preparing for this day. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. I'd love it if you could share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let's begin our story together. The crisp November air bit at my cheeks as I pulled the car onto my parents' street. The old oak trees, usually a warm golden in the fall, stood bare and skeletal against a steel gray sky. Houses I'd known my whole life were decked out in cheerful Thanksgiving garlands. Fat, inflatable turkeys wobbling on manicured lawns, strings of orange lights twinkling prematurely. It felt like a stage set for a holiday I was no longer welcome to attend. This wasn't just any street, and this wasn't just any family gathering. This was the street where the carefully constructed facade of my life and theirs was about to shatter completely, and the home I grew up in would become the place I was officially cast out. I'm Ella. I'm in my early 30s, and for most of my life, I'd been the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who could be counted on. Growing up in this quiet, tree-lined suburb, while my brother Mark was the undeniable center of our small family universe, I was more like a distant, less interesting planet. Mark was the star, charming, impulsive, loud, always needing attention, always getting it. He was the kind of kid who could talk his way out of anything: broken windows, missed curfews, failed classes, and somehow leave you feeling like you were the one who had messed up. I was quiet, observant, finding solace in corners with books or building intricate worlds out of Legos, while Mark filled the house with noise and demands. I learned to occupy minimal space, hoping that by being easy, by being good, by being responsible, I might finally earn a fraction of the effortless adoration poured onto him. Our parents fostered it, whether they realized the damage or not. Mom, with her laser focus on appearances and what the neighbors thought, doted on Mark with an almost desperate energy. Every mediocre drawing he produced was a masterpiece. Every slight challenge he faced was an insurmountable obstacle requiring all hands on deck. She'd smooth over his rough edges, make excuses for his increasingly erratic behavior, celebrating his smallest, most superficial achievements, getting a C+ on a test he barely studied for, charming a difficult relative, as if they were Nobel Prizes. Dad, gruff and pragmatic about finances, home repairs, and local politics, became bewilderingly soft and enabling when it came to Mark. "He's just high-spirited," he'd say with a fond shake of his head after Mark did something truly obnoxious. Or that tired, heavy line he'd drop whenever Mark needed yet another favor or bailout: "Blood is thicker than water." He used it not as a bond of unconditional love and support, but as a twisted justification for Mark's irresponsibility and my required sacrifices. My own quiet achievements, getting into a good college on scholarship, building something stable and real like my business, were met with a perfunctory nod, maybe a grunt of, "That's nice, Ella, keep up the good work," quickly followed by, "But Mark needs our focus right now," or a pivot back to discussing Mark's latest drama. For years, my deepest, most embarrassing weakness was that I desperately craved their genuine approval. It wasn't just about validation. It felt like a missing limb, a fundamental need unmet. I thought if I just worked harder, was more reliable, didn't cause problems, anticipated their needs, if I was just good enough, they would finally see me, truly value me the way they so clearly valued Mark. I believed foolishly that I could somehow earn their love through sheer effort and compliance. It was a persistent, naive hope, a blind spot I couldn't seem to see past, no matter how many times they overlooked me, disappointed me, or subtly undermined me. Mark, meanwhile, bounced from one half-baked scheme to another with boundless, unfounded optimism. A questionable online retail site that burned through seed money in months. A consulting gig that seemed to involve more expensive lunches and golf games than actual work. An app idea he barely coded before abandoning it. Each failure left a trail of debt and disappointed associates. And each time my parents were there, writing checks, smoothing things over with hushed phone calls, often hinting darkly that my stability and growing success meant I should be contributing more to help family. Not just emotional support, but cold, hard cash. My bookstore and cafe, The Daily Grind, wasn't just a business, it was my sanctuary. Built on sweat equity, late nights poring over spreadsheets under a single desk lamp, and the sheer love of stories and community. I'd invested every dollar I had, taken out small loans, learned everything from inventory management to making a perfect latte. It represented my independence, my self-reliance, something purely mine. A solid, thriving thing I had built from the ground up, without their help. My parents saw it differently. They saw an asset, a source of funds, a cash cow. About 3 months ago, the latest, biggest, and most absurd scheme of Mark's hit a wall. It was some kind of convoluted tech startup in the sustainable fashion space that, to my eyes, looked suspiciously like a house of cards built on inflated promises and questionable investor money. Pitched with Mark's usual charisma and zero substance. Mark called first, full of bluster and technical jargon I didn't understand, needing a huge sum fast to bridge things before a major investment came through. Then the joint call came from Mom and Dad. It was orchestrated, chillingly calm and transactional. Mark needed a large sum, $450,000, they specified. The solution, presented as the most obvious, reasonable thing in the world. I should sell The Daily Grind. It's just money, Ella, Mom said, her voice smooth, reasonable, completely missing the fact that my store wasn't just money. It was my independence, my community, my identity, the physical manifestation of years of hard work. Mark's potential is limitless. This is a small price to pay for family, Dad added, his voice low and firm, carrying the weight of paternal authority he rarely deployed, except for control. This is a test of your loyalty, daughter. Family helps family. You do this, and you'll be taken care of. Your place in the family is secure. You don't? Well, Ella, you need to understand. Assets have to go where they'll do the most good for the family name, for the future of the family. It was the most explicit threat of disinheritance yet, a chilling echo of veiled comments made over the years about making sure things are handled fairly or rewarding loyalty. I remember sitting there in my quiet apartment above the store, the phone cold and heavy in my hand. The familiar scent of old paper and coffee from downstairs suddenly felt distant, unreal. My stomach twisted into a hard knot. It wasn't just the money or the store. It was the absolute audacity of the demand, the expectation that I would dismantle my stable, honest life, built brick by painstaking brick, to prop up Mark's unstable, dishonest one, purely out of some twisted sense of obligation. My old, ingrained desire to please them, to finally earn that elusive spot in the center of their world, warred violently with a rising tide of self-preservation and righteous anger. This was the moment. The last vestiges of that naive hope died a painful, drawn-out death. This was my rock bottom in that specific cycle of seeking their approval, finally understanding on a gut level that the approval I craved would only ever be granted if I sacrificed myself on the altar of Mark's needs. My voice trembled slightly, a physical manifestation of the internal earthquake, but the word that came out was clear, firm, and definitive. No! Silence hung on the line, thick, stunned. Then the explosion. Fury, disbelief, as if I had slapped them. Accusations flew. Selfishness, greed, abandoning my brother, not understanding what family truly meant. A betrayal of everything they had supposedly given me. The call ended abruptly with Dad's voice, cold and hard as stone. You made your choice, Ella. Don't expect us to forget this. Don't expect anything from us ever again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my silent, beloved bookstore, tracing the spines of books with my fingers, running my hand over the smooth, worn counter of the cafe. Each object felt precious, imbued with my effort, my dreams, my independence. They wanted me to sell this, the embodiment of my hard work and self-reliance, for Mark's latest mirage of false success. The pain of their rejection was a dull, throbbing ache behind my ribs, a physical manifestation of heartbreak. But beneath it, something new was hardening. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, yes, but more importantly, I was clear-eyed. Their love wasn't unconditional. It was a transaction I could no longer afford, a price too high to pay. And that's when the preparation began. It wasn't born of revenge. Not fully. Not at first. It was born of a cold, clear need for self-preservation. They had threatened my future, my financial security, my place in the family, based on my refusal to blindly support a brother I increasingly suspected was involved in something deeply dishonest, possibly illegal. If they were willing to cut me off so easily for this, what else were they capable of? What if Mark's shady dealings blew up and somehow implicated me because of past small favors I'd done, unaware? What if they tried to seize assets later? I called a lawyer the very next morning. Mr. Henderson had a small office downtown, smelling faintly of old paper and lemon polish. He was kind, sharp, with a calm, steady demeanor and wise eyes that seemed to have seen it all. He listened patiently, never interrupting, as I recounted years of subtle and overt favoritism, Mark's pattern of failures, the specific details of the recent demand to sell my store, the explicit threats of disinheritance. Documentation is key, Ella, he advised, his voice low and gravelly. Start recording every conversation. Save every text, every email, anything that shows their intent, their patterns, and your brother's activities, just in case. That just in case became an obsession, fueled by a growing sense of dread and a need to protect myself. The more I dug into Mark's venture, following faint trails online, the more the charming facade he presented peeled away, revealing something undeniably rotten underneath. Investor forums had whispers of delayed payments, unreturned calls, strange excuses. A former disgruntled investor, a timid, kind man named Mr. Davies, reached out to me after seeing a desperate post I'd made on a niche financial forum, vaguely asking for information about Mark's company. We met at a neutral coffee shop, the clatter of mugs and the hum of conversation a backdrop to his quiet, heartbreaking story of losing his retirement savings. He showed me confusing statements, contradictory promises Mark had made, agreements that seemed deliberately vague. It wasn't just failing, it felt structured to deceive, intentionally misleading. The word Ponzi hung heavy in the air between us, unspoken at first, then whispered with a shared sense of horror. My suspicions solidified into a cold, hard certainty. Mark wasn't just bad at business. He was a con artist, a fraudster. And my parents were either willfully blind to it or, more disturbingly, complicit in enabling potential fraud by trying to use my legitimate assets to prop up his illegitimate ones. Mr. Davies's quiet confirmation felt like a key piece clicking into place. He was an objective outsider, a victim whose experience validated my worst fears about Mark, and by extension, my parents' enabling. And then came the recordings. Mr. Henderson had suggested it, but the first time I actually hit record on my phone before calling Mom felt wrong. Like I was spying on my own family. The beeps indicating recording felt like loud accusations in my ear. But after receiving increasingly vicious, gaslighting texts, things like, "Mark's depression is your fault for not helping him," or, "If anything happens to his business or his reputation, it's on your conscience, Ella," mixed with pointed reminders that they were reviewing their will and considering Mark's needs, I felt a cold determination override my discomfort. I started recording every call, every in-person conversation when I visited briefly before they effectively iced me out completely. Listening back to their voices, calm and reasonable one moment, venomous and threatening the next, explicitly stating their intent to disinherit me if I didn't comply. Hearing them rationalize Mark's failures and my supposed selfishness, it felt like a betrayal replayed on loop. It hardened my resolve, stripped away any lingering doubt. One recording in particular became crucial. A strained conversation between my parents, where Mom, sighing, said, "I know Mark's methods are questionable, George, but he's our son. We have to protect him." Followed by Dad's gruff reply, "Just make sure Ella doesn't find anything concrete. We'll handle the investors quietly once the will is sorted. Ella won't have a leg to stand on anyway." It was chilling proof. They were aware of Mark's dishonesty and planned to silence me and protect him, using inheritance as a weapon. Thanksgiving approached. Like an incoming storm, I could see gathering on the horizon. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Mark in weeks, not since the final freezing texts after his business officially imploded, leaving a trail of angry investors, desperate employees, and relentless debt collectors. Mark had moved back home, living under their roof while they presumably scrambled to deal with the fallout. The The silence from them wasn't the worried kind. It was the deliberate, punitive kind, meant to make me feel the weight of my supposed transgression. Then came the text. 2 weeks out. Thanksgiving dinner is at 2 p.m. Your father expects you to be here. Be on time. No love, no dear, no hint of warmth or reconciliation, just a command. A summons to the principal's office. Part of me dreaded it with a deep physical ache. The thought of facing their manufactured outrage, Mark's sullen resentment, the suffocating tension. But a larger, colder part felt ready. Armed with recordings, documents, printouts of forums, and the quiet validation from Mr. Henderson and Mr. Davies that I wasn't crazy, that their behavior and Mark's actions were manipulative, dishonest, and potentially legally problematic. I decided to go. This wasn't about fixing things anymore. This was about facing them on my terms, drawing a line in the sand so stark, so clear, it couldn't be ignored by anyone. The date circled on my calendar became a focal point, a mix of dread and grim determination. The drive itself was tense, every mile bringing me closer to the inevitable confrontation. The car radio played cheerful holiday music, Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, a bizarre counterpoint to the knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. I rehearsed conversations in my head, different scenarios, different responses, but I knew it would be impossible to predict their actions. My hands felt clammy on the steering wheel as I turned onto their street. Seeing the familiar houses, the festive decorations, the ache of what family should feel like was sharp, a phantom pain. But it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce, cold determination. I wasn't the little girl hoping for a crumb of approval anymore. I was a woman protecting her life, her integrity, and the future she had built. Pulling into the driveway, the familiar sight of the colonial-style house, usually a comforting presence, felt imposing. Like a fortress I was approaching for battle. The autumn wind whipped around me as I got out of the car, carrying the faint, sweet smell of late-blooming roses from my mother's garden. A scent that used to mean comfort, but now felt like another part of the elaborate facade. I saw them immediately, not waiting on the porch with strange smiles of greeting, but standing stiffly side by side, directly in front of the closed front door, blocking entry. The air, already cold, seemed to drop another 20 degrees around them. Their faces, usually so careful to present a pleasant, welcoming mask to the world, were etched with hard fury, rigid disappointment, and something else I couldn't quite place. Fear, quickly masked by anger. I walked toward them, the crunch of gravel under my shoes unnervingly loud in the heavy silence. The short distance felt like miles. There was no warmth, no greeting, just a wall of parental disapproval and cold exclusion. "Ella," my father's voice boomed, devoid of any paternal affection, cutting through the crisp air like ice, echoing slightly in the sudden stillness of the street. "We need to talk, right here." I stopped a few feet away, the cold seeping into my coat. "I'm here, Dad. What is it?" His eyes narrowed, fixed and hard, refusing to soften. "We are deeply disappointed in you, daughter. Deeply. We thought you'd understand. We thought family meant something to you, but you refused to help your brother when he needed it most. You put your money, your store, before your own flesh and blood. That is not what family does." He took a step forward, his voice rising, fueled by self-righteous anger, spitting the words out like accusations. "You refused to sell your store for $450,000 when your brother needed it. You're no longer our daughter." The words hit me not with the force of a punch, but with the chilling precision of a surgeon's cut. No longer our daughter. Years of trying, years of hoping, years of being the backup, the reliable second choice, the daughter who didn't cause trouble, all distilled into that one brutal, erasing sentence. My chest tightened, not just metaphorically, but physically, a suffocating band wrapping around my ribs as if someone had wound barbed wire around my lungs. This was it. The final, unequivocal rejection, the moment I had both dreaded and, in a strange way, prepared myself for. The familiar houses on the street seemed to spin slightly, the festive decorations on the neighbors' homes blurring into meaningless shapes. For a brief, agonizing second, the raw, exposed pain of being truly cast out, of hitting the absolute bottom of their conditional, transactional love, was overwhelming. I stood there, silent, exposed, absorbing the full crushing weight of their final verdict. Then Mom stepped forward, her face a mask of cold resolve, every line hardened, her voice cutting. Final. Each word like a chip of ice. Your father is right, Ella. This family looks after its own. Mark needs everything now. His future is the priority. All our assets will go to your brother. You will receive nothing from us. You made your choice. All our assets. The house I grew up in. The savings meant for their retirement. For our family's future. All of it, going to the son who had squandered every opportunity, burned every bridge, and built a house of cards on a foundation of deceit. Simply because I refused to sacrifice my own honest, hard-earned future to prop him up. This time, the breathtaking unfairness of it all, the casual cruelty, stole my breath. I stared at them, at the two people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally, standing at the door of the house I was supposed to belong to, telling me I was disowned, worthless, replaced by a criminal. The pain was still there, a deep, aching void in my chest, but as I looked at their hard, unforgiving faces, it was quickly being filled by something else. Something cold, something clear, something unbreakable. Resolve. They thought they had all the power. They thought they could just erase me, leave me shattered on their doorstep. They thought they had won. A small, grim smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile, not triumphant. It was the kind of smile that acknowledges a profound, tragic irony, a bitter understanding. They had pushed me away for so long, made me feel like an outsider in my own family. And now, here they were, making it official, thinking I would crumble. But they had no idea. They had no idea that while they were focused on their anger and their assets, I had been quietly, methodically preparing for this very day. My voice was quiet, steady, cutting through the tense air like a scalpel. You think this is about $450,000 in assets? You think you can just cut me off because I wouldn't fund Mark's latest venture? Their expressions tightened, a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, quickly masked by renewed anger. It's about family loyalty, Mom snapped, her voice tight. Is it? My voice was still low, but it held a new steel edge, unwavering. Because I know what happened to Mark's business, and it wasn't just a failure he needed help with. I saw the flicker of fear in their eyes intensify, quickly replaced by sputtering outrage. What are you talking about, Ella? Don't make things up, Dad demanded, taking another step toward me. His posture was threatening, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I'm talking about fraud, Dad, I said, my voice gaining strength, filling the space between us. I know Mark didn't just lose money. He stole it. He ran a Ponzi scheme, preying on investors. I've seen the documents. I've talked to one of his victims, Mr. Davies, and I have proof. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Their eyes locked on it, wary, tight. With a few taps, I located the file and played a recording. It was short, taken from a seemingly casual call weeks ago, right after Mark's business collapsed. My mother's voice, a weary sigh, clearly audible. I know Mark's methods are questionable, George, and I worry about those investors. But he's our son. We have to protect him, whatever it takes. Followed by my father's gruff, practical reply. Just make sure Ella doesn't find anything concrete. Keep her focused on her own shop. We'll handle the investors quietly. Once the will is sorted, Ella won't have a leg to stand on anyway, even if she makes noise. The recording ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Their faces went ashen, the color draining away, leaving behind a sickly, pale mask of shock and dawning horror. They stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a venomous snake about to strike. Mark appeared suddenly behind them in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. His eyes were wide, fixed on the phone, his face a picture of pure panic. You recorded us? Mom whispered, her voice barely a breath. The outrage of moments before completely gone, replaced by raw, exposed fear. You threatened to disinherit me and called me disloyal for refusing to participate in your son's criminal enterprise, I said, my voice cold now, devoid of emotion. A stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. You planned to silence me and use inheritance as a weapon. What did you expect me to do? Roll over? I looked from one to the other, then at Mark, frozen in the doorway. You're so worried about assets going to Mark? Maybe you should be more worried about where he's going to end up spending the next few years. Hint, it's not inheriting a mansion. Dad lunged forward then, a raw, guttural sound escaping his throat, reaching for the phone. I stepped back quickly, out of his reach, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. Get off my property, he roared, his face purple with rage, spittle flying. "You're insane! You're making this up! We'll sue you! You'll regret this, Ella! We'll make sure you lose everything!" "My property," I echoed, the sheer absurdity of the threat striking me. Standing on the driveway of the house I'd helped maintain. The family whose debts I had often quietly covered, whose messes I'd helped clean up over the years, the house I spent weekends repairing instead of building my own life, the family whose narrative you've controlled my entire life. Fine. I took another step back, turning my body toward my car, the wind whipping around me. You wanted to kick me out. You wanted to cut me off. Consider it done. You achieved it. I looked back at them one last time, my parents standing there, rigid, blocking the door to a house that was no longer a home, their faces a mixture of rage and trapped fear. Mark, hovering behind them, small and terrified in the doorway. "You just made your biggest mistake," I said, my voice clear, steady, and carrying the full weight of the truth. "You just kicked out the only person who knew the truth and had the proof to back it up." Turning my back completely, I walked purposefully toward my car. The silence that followed their final, choked protests was deafening. But it felt different now. Not the silence of defeat, but the tense, charged quiet after an explosion. Mine. Theirs. Getting into my car, I didn't look back. I started the engine. The familiar rumble, a comforting sound of reality. I drove away from the house, the street, the family, the life I had tried so desperately for so long to fit into. The tears came then, hot and fast, blurring the twinkling holiday lights of the other houses into streaks of color. It was a deep, wrenching sob that shook my entire body, mourning not the loss of assets, but the loss of the family I had always longed for, the final, undeniable proof that the love I craved was never truly there. But beneath the pain, beneath the grief, was a burgeoning sense of liberation, terrifying and exhilarating. I was free. The first call I made wasn't to weep on a friend's shoulder, though I knew I would need that later. It was to Mr. Henderson. I pulled over to the side of the road, the car shaking slightly. "It happened," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion, the tears still streaming down my face. "They kicked me out, just like they said they would. It's time." The days and weeks that followed were a blur of legal action and a profound, ongoing emotional upheaval. Mr. Henderson was efficient, calm, and methodical. A steady hand guiding me through the confusing, cold world of the legal system. Based on the evidence I provided, the emails, the financial documents I'd painstakingly gathered, the damning recordings, Mr. Davies' testimony, we filed the police report detailing Mark's fraudulent business practices. The process felt sterile, clinical, a stark contrast to the raw, messy, emotional family drama that had preceded it. Handing over the recordings felt like handing over pieces of my own heart, exposing the ugly truth of my family to strangers. But it was necessary. The legal process unfolded swiftly, almost clinically, exposing the rot at the core of Mark's venture. Detectives reviewed the evidence, corroborated Mr. Davies' story, and found other victims who had been hesitant to come forward. The paper trail was undeniable. Mark was arrested a week before Christmas. A surreal headline in the local paper, just under the holiday event listings. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. His carefully constructed facade of success, the one my parents had desperately clung to and tried to fund with my future, imploded completely. Not just within the family, but publicly. The news sent ripples through our community. My parents' reaction to Mark's arrest and my undeniable role in it was predictably volatile and self-serving. Denial, outrage, and a frantic, desperate attempt to control the narrative. They called relatives, mutual friends, even posted carefully worded, passive-aggressive updates on social media, trying to paint me as a vengeful, greedy daughter who was trying to ruin her innocent brother and generous parents out of spite because I didn't get my way. Their signature move, distorting reality and prioritizing appearances above all else, was on full display. A desperate, flailing attempt to regain control. "Ella is unstable," I heard they told one relative. "She's making wild accusations because she's jealous of Mark." But this time, the truth had receipts, police reports, and eventually court documents. When the local news reported on Mark's arrest and explicitly mentioned that the investigation was triggered by a report from a family member who had provided crucial evidence, the whispers in the community turned into open questions, uncomfortable glances, and eventually undeniable proof that their story was false. The social fallout was brutal, a secondary battlefield that sometimes felt just as painful as the initial rejection. Some relatives, particularly those who had benefited from my parents' or Mark's largesse, or those who simply couldn't fathom challenging the sanctity of the family unit, reflexively sided with my parents, shunning me. Awkward encounters at the grocery store where people pretended not to see me. Friends I shared with Mark, or my parents suddenly going silent, or offering cold, non-committal responses. It hurt. A different kind of pain from the initial rejection, a confirmation that the family system was rotten far beyond the core unit, that many prioritized comfort and appearance over truth and integrity. But there were also the unexpected allies, the people who stepped out of the shadows. Mr. Henderson, of course, was more than just a lawyer. He became a source of quiet, professional support, his calm demeanor and unwavering belief in the facts anchoring me when the emotional waves threatened to pull me under. He validated the reality of the manipulation I'd endured, helping me see it clearly, not as a personal failure, but as a dynamic I had finally escaped. And Mr. Davies, the timid investor Mark had defrauded, reached out again after the news broke. He wasn't family by blood, but he had also been a victim of Mark's deceit and, in a way, my parents' enabling system. Sharing our experiences, confirming the patterns of manipulation, the hollow promises, the sense of being used, was incredibly validating and healing. He represented the objective outsider who saw the truth without the filters of history or obligation. Other unexpected allies emerged, a distant cousin who had seen similar dynamics in the family years ago but kept quiet, an old neighbor who had always found Mark's lifestyle questionable. Their support, quiet or open, helped redefine what belonging felt like. Then came the second twist, unearthed almost accidentally during the legal discovery process related to Mark's assets and debts. It wasn't about money or hidden accounts, but a secret from the past that shed a disturbing, heartbreaking light on my parents' bizarre, extreme favoritism toward Mark. Tucked away in an old safety deposit box, one that Mark had somehow accessed, were bundles of letters and documents from decades ago. They revealed that Mark was not, as everyone in the family and community believed, my father's biological son. He was the product of a brief, hidden affair my mother had before I was born, shortly after she and Dad were married. My father, upon discovering the truth shortly after Mark's birth, but choosing to stay in the marriage, had evidently made a pact with my mother. They would raise Mark as his own, and he would overcompensate with relentless favoritism, indulgence, and financial support. This wasn't just typical parental preference. It was a lifelong performance, driven by my father's buried insecurity, a desperate need to prove he was Mark's real father by providing everything, protecting him from all consequences, and showering him with resources that weren't truly earned. This revelation, while adding a layer of tragic context to my parents' extreme, irrational behavior, did not excuse their abuse, their neglect of me, or their enabling of Mark's criminal behavior. It simply showed that the facade they presented to the world, the perfect family, the successful golden son, the fair parents, was built on a lie that warped their relationships with both of us. It provided a deeper, albeit painful understanding, for me, and eventually for the audience who would hear my story. Here is part 6 of the rewritten script with Ella as the protagonist, approx 1,100 words. So, the moment of justice wasn't a single dramatic courtroom showdown, though Mark's sentencing had its own severe atmosphere. It was a series of quiet, undeniable consequences unfolding. Mark pleaded guilty to some charges to reduce his sentence, facing years in state prison. The investors, including Mr. Davies, received some restitution, though far less than they had lost. The damage was done, and trust, once broken, rarely fully returns. My parents, while not charged as accomplices in the fraud, faced intense scrutiny from the community and, I suspect, from within themselves. The public shame, the whispers, the damaged reputation, the dismantling of the carefully curated image they had cherished above all else. For them, that was perhaps a harsher punishment than any fine. They lost standing, credibility, and the very social facade they had prioritized over genuine human connection. I didn't pursue further legal action against my parents directly regarding inheritance or past financial manipulations. The criminal case against Mark, the public exposure of their complicity, and the deeper family secret felt like a more profound karmic resolution. Their threats of disinheritance became meaningless in the face of Mark's felony convictions and their own public humiliation. What was there left to inherit from a foundation of lies? The healing process was slow, messy, ongoing. Cutting ties completely was one of the hardest things I've ever done, a deep, painful amputation that left a phantom ache. There were days the grief was overwhelming, a wave of sadness for the family I wished I'd had, the unconditional love and acceptance I never received. I went to therapy. I processed the years of neglect and manipulation. I let myself grieve. But slowly, surely, with the grief came liberation. The constant anxiety, the knot in my stomach, the feeling of being constantly judged and found wanting, it began to dissipate. I focused on rebuilding. Not just my emotional state, but my life. Nurturing the relationships that were based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine affection. My store, The Daily Grind, continued to thrive, becoming more than just a business, but a hub of community and a symbol of my resilience. A tangible result of my own honest hard work, untouched by their toxicity. I nurtured my friendships, leaned on Mr. Henderson's quiet wisdom, stayed in touch with Mr. Davies, finding strength in our shared experience, and I began to build my chosen family. A network of people who saw me, valued me, and supported me for who I was, not for what they could extract from me, or what role they needed me to play in their own twisted narrative. Thanksgiving, the year after, I had dinner not with blood relatives in a house filled with tension and unspoken resentments, but with Mr. Henderson, Mr. Davies, and a few close friends in my own small apartment above the store. We shared food, stories, laughter, and quiet gratitude for the simple comfort of genuine connection. It wasn't the loud, tense performance of my childhood Thanksgivings, but a warm, peaceful gathering filled with authentic affection. Sitting there, feeling truly seen and accepted, I finally understood that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose you, who see you, support you, and love you for who you are, not what they can get from you, or what illusion they need to maintain. Looking back, my parents thought they were taking everything from me by kicking me out that Thanksgiving day. They thought they were punishing me, leaving me isolated and ruined, proving that I was nothing without them. But they were profoundly wrong. By forcing me out, by severing that toxic tie so completely and dramatically, they gave me the greatest gift I could have ever received. My freedom, my integrity, my self-respect, and the chance to build a life and find a family based on truth, honesty, and genuine connection, rather than manipulation, lies, and conditional love. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people you're supposed to be closest to, but sometimes losing your family is the only way to finally find yourself.